Hello, my name is Kaethe Weingarten, and I'm sitting in my home office, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my article, Sorrow, a Therapist's Reflection on the Inevitable and the Unknowable, that I wrote really to try to think my way through, feel my way through, and write my way through a very distressing, disturbing situation about which very little is written by therapists. And that is, I learned that a young woman with whom I had had a number of phone call conversations as a what Harlene Anderson calls a conversational partnership had killed herself. In reflecting daily, sometimes hourly, on my experience, the word that came to mind for me was the word sorrow. And I spent some time looking at the word sorrow in other languages to see whether or not the sound of the word sorrow was as resonant as it was in other languages. It isn't. And then I started doing a literature search on sorrow, and I came into a vein of articles on a subject that I had not known anything about, and yet it spoke to me about my own life and about the life of the young woman who had killed herself, and about other people that I see in my clinical practice. One of the things you'll read about in the article is that I was blind for a period of months, and that disrupted my relationship with this young woman. And that's why I'm going to put my glasses on to read this. The article is an extended meditation on the meanings for people like me, people who have lived for long periods of time with disability or illness, of living with a painful gap between who they've been and who they are now, of how they want to be and how they can be, of who they dreamt themselves to be and who they still long to be. We are people who live with chronic sorrow, a normal, non-pathological state of pervasive, continuing, periodic, and resurgent sadness related to the ongoing losses associated with illness and disability. In this case, not loss of an other, but loss of self. And that definition, or some of that writing, is based on work by Susan Roos, who's written a beautiful book on chronic sorrow. So in this paper, I talk about myself, about the lives of four women whose lives have very much been penetrated by chronic sorrow. And I do what I always do, if you've read any of my other work, which is to try to understand how macro processes, large, large issues like disability shame and genocide actually can interpenetrate the interstices of our moment-to-moment life, even our embodied life. I talk from a narrative point of view about narrative disruption and different kinds of narrative disruption. And then the last section of the paper is really about what therapists can do who work with people with chronic sorrow. And I think I raised some pretty important questions, even about something as fundamental as the self and how therapists can think about the self in ways that may be more useful to the people with whom we work and ourselves, whatever that means. Contact me if you want. I'd love to hear from you after you read this paper. Thank you.